All right, good morning, everybody. Really excited for the full room, and sounds like y'all are having some good conversations, so we'll be expecting some good questions and no crickets later, just for this group. My name is Shannon Hoffman. I am the Policy Program Officer at the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health and one of the co-chairs for the Youth Work Group. Making sure y'all are in the right room that you're expecting youth mental health, and today we're going to be talking about how we can support youth mental health through school community partnerships. So I'll be giving a little overview similarly to what you heard from Anna this morning. I'll be hearing from a youth, guardian, and provider perspective, and then we'll be going into a little Q&A. And also asking if you have any feedback, there'll be opportunity to get that from you, as well as we have a one-pager overviewing what we'll be talking about today. There's plenty in the back extras if that is something that you want to also share with others. As I said, there will be a Q&A opportunity as well as a place to provide us feedback. We are going to be using Mentimeter. Is that right? Okay. And so there is a QR code if you have your smartphone to go ahead now and scan it. And if there are questions that pop up for you, whether that is for me or for our wonderful panel, you can input it throughout the process. And there will also, like I said, be time at the end where we'll be passing the mic around where you can also ask the question there. So, the coalition, building off of the work that we did last session, we really saw an opportunity to look at and hear from folks what is missing for kids? Like, what is a solution to make sure that kids, families, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their access to health insurance, et cetera, what is a way that we can really support their mental health and well-being much more sooner and earlier than when maybe there's an opportunity, a need for emergency room, for interactions with the juvenile justice system, the child welfare system. Where could we really support the state in providing that support earlier? And so our work group and coalition really landed on school community partnerships, which requires both support in the community and support at schools. Really seeing and leveraging the grant program that was created last session through Senate Bill 26. It's known as the SMART, and I can't think of what S-M-A-R-T, the acronym, stands for, so we're just gonna say SMART, Innovation Grant Program. That grant program for its first inception was awarded $30 million, which to me is still wild that that's like in that realm is considered budget, like dust, I think as Allison referred to it this morning. But when we think about the vast needs across the state and how many kiddos and families are really in need of support, 30 million, great start. But what we learned actually a few weeks ago during the legislative budget board budget hearings is that the agency received, there's about still $100 million worth of proposals that were unable to be fulfilled because of the limitations of how many funds there were. So we know, great first start in being able to provide a number of organizations with some funds to continue or expand the care that they're providing to kids and families now, but there's a lot more that we could do, and that there's a lot of folks that are wanting it. And so really leveraging that, expanding on that, putting some more funds in so that that opportunity is available to more orgs and widely across the state. Secondly, that is one avenue to provide more support in communities, and then also looking at opportunities to provide supports in schools. We know that there are no dedicated funds going to school districts right now for mental health. There are some opportunities for some schools, but there are no dedicated funds that go to districts for them to decide how and what they need to support their kids and families in their districts. So we have a menu here that we hope that dependent on who is able to champion, who is able to get on board. There are a lot of different opportunities for a lot of different folks at the legislature to get on board with their comfortability. And we have identified, working off of last session, that Texas could create and fund a school mental health allotment so that districts get those dollars directly and can decide what is needed and what they're able to do to support their students and teachers and community. Also, Health and Human Services, they have some really great prevention and promotion programs, but not every school has access to that. There's already existing infrastructure for that. Let's put more money into that, get that to more schools. Sustaining some of the programs that are currently funded through federal support, like Project Aware grants. We know many schools use ESSER funds to create opportunities in their schools. And so without continued funds, those programs are at risk of not continuing. And lastly, at TEA, there are some programs for at-risk schools and students, including communities in schools and out-of-school time, that have mental health components to it, and we really see that as an opportunity to really support kiddos, families holistically before the need to access some of those higher, more expensive, more restrictive levels of care. And so that is the lens that we are coming from, and really excited to have our panel here with us this morning. So I'm going to transition over. And so that we can have a conversation about the perspective from a youth, guardian, and provider. Thanks, y'all, for being here. Let me get my notes. Okay, so Veronica is an LPC supervisor in the state of Texas and a registered play therapist. She obtained her Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology from Texas A&M University, Kingsville, and her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling from TWU Denton. Veronica has close to 10 years of experience in clinical counseling, working with children and families in various settings, especially with those that have experienced trauma. For the past 6 years, she has worked with Communities in Schools San Antonio across multiple districts and held leadership positions in the development of programs for suicide prevention, domestic violence, trauma counseling, and working with the Head Start children and families. Veronica currently provides crisis support to the school communities as part of the CISSA Clinical Crisis Team and the ECISD Crisis Response Team. Thanks for being here, Veronica. Ira Salam, okay. A senior at Westlake High School, is a passionate advocate for mental health awareness, dedicated to creating supportive environments both inside and outside of school. In her free time, she created a mental health resource page to educate the community on different mental health disorders, treatment options, and local therapists and psychiatrists. She was also part of the 2024 Spark Change Facilitator cohort with Girls Empowerment Network and the Excellence and Advancements Foundation, where she had the great honor of gathering insights into what youth of Austin saw imperative like school safety, healthy relationships, and mental health, all while growing as a leader, team member, and advocate. How old are you? I'm 17. Very different than what I was doing when I was 17. Thank you for being here. Dr. Sarah Miller Fellows is the Director of Impact at Girls Empowerment Network. She is the mother of a 5th grader and 2nd grader in Round Rock ISD. Dr. Miller Fellows is driven by the idea that there is no such thing as other people's children and working to create a world where all children have what they need to thrive. She has 14 years of experience in children's policy advocacy in Ohio and Texas. She returned to her hometown of Austin, Texas, and joined Girls Empowerment Network in 2019, where she leads their efforts to measure the impact of their programs on self-efficacy, positive peer bonding, and connection to adult role models. She is passionate about connecting the experiences of youth and those who work with them with the legislative process to create a more equitable Texas. So, again, thank y'all for being here. I think y'all bring such important perspectives to this work. And so, as you heard, our work group is really focused on some of those tier 1 mental health supports like character education, restorative practices, social and emotional, which like I said, we can't say SEL anymore. So social emotional skills lessons. Can you talk about your interactions with these systems, either as a youth, as a parent, as a provider, and how this interaction has really impacted you in your work. Sorry.
Thank you. So I come from a high school that has made significant strides in bettering the mental health for youth in our school. For example, during Suicide Prevention Week, we had, like, one day we had therapy dogs come, and then another day, like, in the common area, we had, like, informative booths of, like, different pamphlets of, like, different mental disorders, treatment options, and, like, local therapists. And I think not only was that, like, a fun and engaging event for all the high schoolers in our high school to come together to talk about mental health, which in that it diminishes, like, the stigma around it. But it also just, everyone was talking about suicide, and I think as a youth, I think the stigma around mental health is something that definitely needs to become overcome, because that is definitely a big issue in youth. So I think having more engaging events in high school settings would definitely be more important.
Thank you. So I'll definitely speak to the, just the work that we have had going in the schools already. Communities in Schools, thankfully, has had the honor of working across 13 school districts in the San Antonio area, all the way down to Uvalde now is our most recent location. And just really seeing the multi-tiered systems of support embedded in the school system has been really a good work in regards to allowing everybody to have a seat at the table in regards to making decisions for our youth. Speaking in the tier work, right, and the really foundational work of the Tier 1 work in the school-wide, community-wide, and we're really seeing the impact not only on the teacher wellness aspect of it and ensuring that they are well to provide wellness to our students and really ready to educate and being there for what they really are trained to do, teaching our children and ensuring that they are well, but also elevating community awareness and training in addition to not only those in the school, but also the community impact, specifically our parents, right? Really stemming that into really empowering them to say, join an event in the campus. We are really elevating the Tier 1 work here, and that really just speaks to school-wide events, programming, just like she talked, that really the engagement is there. We talk about it, we see the issues, and we need to have a place where people feel comfortable and have an understanding that, just as much as we have awareness for any other issue that is pressing, it's a mental health crisis. Our youth are dying. Our youth are utilizing substances because as a choice in coping. So that preventative work is really important through that, campus level work. That Tier 2 really focuses on that group support and more intervention piece. At the seat at the table, you bring them on a weekly basis. As you're able to see students really focusing on that need higher level than what it is to be educated around mental health, you start identifying those intervention pieces. Whether it is community partnerships, whether it is someone on the campus that can build on to that case management piece, or really elevating it to behavioral specialists already on the campus, which is a service provider that most school districts have, not all, have the capacity for. And then we really push that onto that Tier 3 work, right? When those services are already not working, you identify that as a preventative lens and saying, this is a student that might need individual one-to-one support, and really helping all those sitting at the table, whether it's the nurse, the school counselor, the admin principal, the nonprofit sitting at the table, if we have the opportunity, and really leveraging the work and saying, we know exactly what that student needs and we're able to provide it. So, thank you.
Thanks so much. I kind of have the dual benefit of working for an organization that provides Tier 1 services and being a parent with kids in school age groups. And I'm going to take off my work hat for a moment and speak about a personal family experience, which is that last year my younger child, when she was in 4th grade, started showing pretty significant symptoms of anxiety. And I work for a mental health services-oriented organization. We have a lot of family background of mental health providers. And even with all of that background, it was pretty clear that she was going to need some additional support. And so we went to her pediatrician. We got a list of sort of recommended play therapists and all of these different services. And it was really impacting her ability to be in school. And she was worried about all kinds of things. And she's just such a outgoing, confident kid. It was really rough to see her go through that. And every service that would accept insurance had a 6 to 9 month waiting list in the city of Austin. And I was so worried and scared as a parent about what would happen if she didn't get support for 6 to 9 months. And we are privileged enough to be in a position that we were able to find an out-of-pocket provider that had a shorter wait list, more like 3 months. But Ad Experience really put in such perspective the importance of those tier 1 and school-based services, because she's in a family where her mom works for an organization that supports youth mental health. 2 of her grandfathers are clinical psychologists. And it was still so hard to access services. And I think about every other kid in her classroom that might be going through similar things and doesn't have all of those resources. And that really brought home how important those school-based services are at all of the tiers.
Thank y'all for providing that perspective from each of the different lenses. And, it sounds like we're all in agreement that mental health supports in schools is good. It's something that we should be doing. And thank you for sharing, Sarah, from a parent's perspective. I think especially those that are working up at the Capitol and advocating often get asked, like, why schools? So I'd love to hear from y'all's perspectives around telling us a success story about when you yourself, friends, you saw a youth be connected, how it impacted them academically, socially, and connected to their experience at school.
Thank you. I don't think it's a rare occurrence at all for youth to be connected to mental health advocates. For example, just the other day, my friend was stressed with a senior applying to colleges, school, and social life. And in my school, we're very lucky to have school-based therapists, so they're trained to address the mental health concerns, and they're in the school environment. And I just suggested during class, because it was a work day, and I suggested, hey, why don't you go visit the school-based therapist? And she came back definitely way lighter, calmer. She had slime and stress balls in her hand. And I think having those therapists in the school environment definitely makes a huge change. And you see that in her being more present in her academic life and her social life. She's more focused and less stressed of external factors in classrooms. And then while she's hanging out with a big group of friends, she's more present, more smiling, and she found healthy coping strategies for her anxiety. So, yeah.
So I'll speak to when I did that direct work with the youth and really working on a school district in San Antonio, and not sharing too much details for confidentiality, but really sharing the story of a teenager that in her capacity of understanding what was going on with her, she really had no other option. And when she starts sharing those stories, I think it helps us as a professional sitting on the other side and really trying to find options for her, because what she really is sharing is to the point of us sharing every resource we have available and her not being able to access it, right? Whether it's in the home or not. And the specific student didn't have the support of the caregivers, which a lot of time we are seeing, and that's why the importance of the tier 1s to educating our parents and the work on the school-wide events, but really almost putting into perspective her trauma and her pain in regards to what does that look like to continue to live like that, and what is her life going to look like if we don't intervene now, right? So as a clinical therapist in the schools, which we have the honor of doing, it really allows you to kind of do that work once a week, right? Once a week support, if the time is there, to be able to provide the student with the connection with someone that they can openly share when they really can't know more. And when that pain is too much, and her witnessing anything from domestic violence, right, being homeless now as a teenager, experiencing, a father with substance use, and then going through the bereavement of her father due to related to that. So you see a lot of factors there that really her only support was peer support. And then we see that those peers there are not always 100% where we want our youth to be, because they're surrounded by people that sometimes also are not privileged to have the access to resources. So they group themselves in around a resource of support that is not very helpful, and we see that all the time. The success story comes with, after seeing her on a weekly basis, just, you know, one day being able to kind of really receive an invitation for her graduation, seeing that she was there, seeing that she missed school so many days, seeing that she said, oh, I made it to school today because I remembered I had counseling, right? And really just sneaking into, I didn't come the rest of the week, but Tuesdays I am here. And I think it's important to make emphasis on that, you know, not only is that affecting and helping her mental health, but also really seeing, you know, what does attendance look like for a youth on the schools, and if it's, you know, if it's partnerships in the school-based setting, really seeing, you know, we're not only seeing the mental health issue, we're seeing it in the academic world, in the behavioral world, in the attendance world, and really elevating what is the foundation of all these issues and putting in our 2 cents to be able to get everybody to that graduation piece.
I think the question of why schools is really simple. I think it's where kids are. Like, I think where are kids? They're at schools. Like, there is not another common gathering place in our communities that kids are. Like, that's the very simple answer. If you want to help kids, you go where they are. And the answer is, for the majority of them, that's where you're going to catch the most kids, is at school. Just really simply. And I think the other piece of it academically is, if you do the math with my kids, my 5th grader was in kindergarten when COVID happened. It was spring break of his kindergarten year was the last time he went to school for more than 12 months, like in person. And I don't think you can discount the effects of the way that just losing out on those in-person social interactions for a whole cohort of kids is still impacting them. They're still figuring out conflict management. They're still figuring out how to navigate relationships in the school environments. And professionally at our organization, we hear that from schools all the time, that kids have forgotten how to make friends. They don't know how to make those connections beyond sort of the interactions that they have in the classroom. And I think that that's something that many of those Tier 1 supports provide, is that place for kids to make connections and to learn those skills, to be in community with each other and to form collaborative relationships with each other. And we know that kids' cognitive function, everybody, adults' cognitive function dips dramatically when you're stressed. So if you have kids that are stressed, if you have kids that don't feel connected to their peers, they're not going to do as well academically. It's decades of research show that if you're not supporting kids' mental health, they're not going to achieve their potentials.
Yeah, thank y'all for sharing those stories about, you know, how you've seen it be successful. I love that story about the graduation and the kiddo coming to school because she knew that you and the counseling was going to be there for her on those days. I love that. I think it's the epitome of like why schools. But we also know there are limitations to schools. Summertime, before, after. So I think I really commend the work group on really looking at those and seeing how the community school partnerships could be a really unique opportunity if given the resources. So we spent, you know, the first few questions on schools. I would love to hear y'all's perspectives around how the mental health portion in communities, how that has either supported yourself, your friends, or you've seen school community partnerships be beneficial for kiddos outside of those traditional school hours and time.
So I come from a community, I'm South Asian, so in our culture, mental health is oftentimes perceived as you're weak or it's like fake, it's a myth. And so battling this is definitely a struggle. And again, it kind of comes back to the stigma around mental health that I, as a youth, definitely with the stigma feel reluctant to reach out to different mental health resources or like even talk about my mental health. So I think it's definitely like a battle in our community. Recently, there's been like in my local mosque, there's been like workshops every Sunday in the month where mental health advocates like psychiatrists come together and anyone can join the Zoom. And it's kind of how to battle mental health in teenagers, children, adults. And I think just having those workshops and it's like over Zoom, anyone can join. There's like less limitations. And I think that's definitely like a success in just battling the stigma around mental health in my community.
So definitely in my position, I do have, funded, and you talked a little bit about Project Aware. So we are grateful to be under a 5-year grant now, going on year 2. Through Communities in Schools San Antonio, partnering with East Central ISD, that allows us really to place 6 mental health professionals on the campus. A big goal of that through Project Aware is building those mental health partnerships, and we've seen that through the MTSS work. Sitting at the table discussing a student and elevating those tier 1 opportunities really allows us to focus. What does the screening say, right? Well, we provide a panorama screening, which allows us to measure anything from school climate, low self-esteem, negative relationships between students and teachers, and really the stress level of teachers as well. So you make an impact on what the need is, and building those partnerships very specific to what the campus is needing. For example, our LMHCs are receiving a lot of referrals due to parent death, caregiver death, or adult death in their family. So we're able to elevate, our clinicians focusing on the niche area of anxiety and depression, and really being able to build a partnership, for example, with Family Services or even Children's Bereavement Center on really identifying what is the niche of each partnership and really bringing them in to be able to address the child and specific need that they have. And those conversations happen at that table on a weekly basis when the student is staffed, and really what is the result of the general counseling that's being received, and where do we have to build those partnerships to be able to elevate that specific need that is helpful for not only the student body, but also for the community.
I can speak to one of the partnerships that Girls Empowerment Network has had for many years, which is with the LEAD program in Del Valle ISD, and it predates my time at Gen, which is at this point almost 6 years. And one of the things that we do is on most of their elementary campuses provide a once-a-week group that happens during the after-school program that is for girls in 3rd through 5th grade. And I've gotten over my time to be able to attend several of those. And it means that after-school time is a time where students are forging connections with each other. They're able to bond across classrooms, across grade levels, and form these kinds of peer relationships that are going to be really important to carry them through the rest of the school year. And one of my favorite things that we do as an organization in our effort to connect youth to relatable role models is called Power Chats, which is where we bring in people from the community who are professionals and essentially do speed dating with the youth in our programs. They sit in groups of 2 to 3, and they ask them about their careers. And it is always such a joy to see these students who are in this after-school program get to be like, oh, I like social media, I like marketing. I didn't know that you could do marketing for a construction company. I didn't know that you could do marketing for a tech company. And seeing the things, having them feel inspired and feel those connections. And we know that one of the most important things that youth can have for their overall mental health is connections with peers, but also connections with adults, and this vision to see of who they could be in the future. And I think that that's something that I wish every youth got an opportunity to do. I wish that was part of every after-school program, that they got to build really genuine connections, because so often after-school programs can just sometimes be, we're going to throw you all in the room and have somebody supervising you in the cafeteria, which is wonderful and needed, but I think about the opportunities that are being missed there, that what if they were building those connections? What if they were learning skills they were going to carry over to the school day? In a really concrete way, and being able to use that time effectively.
Thank you all. So before we transition to some question and answer, I would love to hear from y'all, from the youth provider parent perspective. What do you think would make the most substantial change? Small, large, but what are some of the largest barriers and potential solutions that you see that advocates like us, that the legislature should also be advocating for? If you could pick one thing, what would that one thing be?
Okay, that is very hard. But I think it is very essential to provide training to teachers and staff on how to better recognize and address mental health concerns to the youth and high schoolers. As someone who has obviously talked to a teacher about mental health concerns, stresses, anxiety, I think it would just be healthier and safer for teachers and staff to have the right training and resources to address and recognize the mental health in high schoolers or middle schoolers or even elementary schoolers.
And I'm going to piggy off of her. Definitely a hard decision, as you say, one. But I know our time is limited, so I can't talk forever. But I could. But just really looking at, stemming what from she was saying, really that prevention work, right? That's really where we're at. We're ahead of the crisis. We need to move back. We need to move back. We can't have any more youth experience things like this. We're in a position where this youth are a future in that sense. Are we even going to have a future with where we're going and really where that crisis stands, and really not only in the schools and the training of educators, and really not only providing the training but also allowing the training for them the time for them to do and see in that training, and also increasing capacity, right? Our teachers are you guys know that's a whole other conversation, but they're stretched so thin and they wear so many hats. But really focusing on are they well to be able to do that, and also do we have the personnel on campus? Do we have the time on campus to be able to elevate the needs of our youth when they speak to us? They're the frontline workers on the campuses. My sister being a teacher herself at a high school, she comes to me like, they shared with me this, but they don't want me to share. And I was like, well, you gotta share. That's where we're at. But they're the ones that build relationships with these kids. So, you see that opportunity of building connection, and these students are not having the time to build connection in the schools, to build connection with the educators. We really need to sit down and look at our youth and really ask, is everything okay?
Funding that has to go towards mental health, but is at the discretion of each district, and even each campus. That's something that we encounter professionally, and I've seen personally as times that there's an opportunity for a really great program, and there might be money, but it's not money that can be used for this. It's money that has to be used for that. And I think that, or it's dedicated for this program, but there's this other program that's new to our area, but we'd love to have it come in, but we've already said we could only use this fund for this thing. And I think just that piece of money that then campus, that has to go towards mental health, 'cause I think there's always a million competing budget items, but that they can decide how it goes, I think is ultimately the most important thing.
Well, thank y'all so much. Round of applause for our wonderful panel and sharing their perspectives. So again, we're going to move to some question and answer from the audience after hearing some of the information we talked about. Some folks have submitted some questions, but I did want to offer the opportunity for y'all here in the crowd, to ask some questions directly, and then if we have some time, I'll move to the questions from the submissions. Oh, I have one right here.
Thank you so much, and what a wonderful panel you three are. My question is related to mental health and shooting in the schools. And legislatively, dealing with the whole shoot gun issue is important if we want to really, really deal with some other aspects of mental health. And so for young lady in school, do you have like training in school in terms to if there's an alarm or anything, and how does that impact your mental health?
This is a hard one because we're dealing with two different things. Definitely, I think with the school shootings and shootings in general, mental health is the first step. Oftentimes you see a lot of, in the dangerous situations, mental health is the first thing you look at. My mic. Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure if it was mine. But yeah, I think it just all goes back to the main issue is mental health and tackling that. I don't know, I can't affirmatively say that, but I think that would definitely help with the other battle at hand. But that's coming from a youth perspective.
So I'll speak a little bit on that and just the prevention work that happens and that just needs to grow, right? We see a lot of youth, there's a fear on this end of children and educators and everybody on campus really being fearful of what is going to happen every day, right? We faced in 1 week, we had 3 crises where in relation to that, not specifically to the point where it was dangerous, but to the point where these kids were triggered in that sense for that capacity. What do we do when they don't want to come to school the next day? As a professional sitting there, you can't call and tell a parent, bring your kid to school, because the parent's gonna be like, well, yesterday, right? So how do you explain that, but also really helping mitigate that support to be able to help our students feel safe, right? We want to build a world where their students are safe when they feel safe, and really focusing on addressing not only the anxiety that comes from having that possibility of being fearful of being on the campus, but also focusing on addressing through that tier work, really identifying, having those conversations before any of these tragedy happen, so that we can work on elevating the importance of working on your mental health, working on the aggression piece, working on the prevention of violence piece, working on addressing anything that would trigger anything that pushes children to think other than bringing joy to the world, which is really where they naturally stand from a very young age, and really focusing on leveraging that, their self-esteem, their strengths, their joy, their pathways, their sense of belonging, their sense of connection, and really focusing around those factors. So I agree with you.
This is a tough one for me. I'm going to show my age, but I was in 5th grade when Columbine happened. And as a parent, it's devastating that is still a thing I have to worry about when I send my kids to school. Like, that we have not figured this out is personally one of the most upsetting things to me about the world we live in. And I think the mental health piece is so important. And I think that sometimes we spend so much time focusing on the mental health of somebody who's a potential shooter, and we don't think about the mental health of what it's like for kids to live in an environment where school isn't safe. And I think that the most important thing that we can do all around is to create school environments that feel safe and feel nurturing, and where adults feel like where kids feel like they can trust the adults around them, that they're supported by the adults around them, because I think that is going to address all of those bigger picture issues as much as you can through the school lens. I think that ultimately making schools a safe place is essential for all of the kids involved.
Great. Any other questions for our panelists? I know we have a lot submitted.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I'm a psychiatrist in a private practice, so I took a day off to come here and see the great work you guys are doing, because it gives me a lot of hope for the public policy, the need to improve. Sometimes when I'm frustrated, this is very hopeful to come out here and say lots of people doing good work out there. And I really appreciate what CIS is doing in the community for my kids. So that's amazing. I was in residency at UT Southwestern, and they did family therapy, part of the therapy that happened at CIS. So it was a funding that came through Highland Park, through their parent funding, that any kid which was identified at risk got about 6 sessions with UT Southwestern Family Therapy Department, and then they could take it from there. And I really, being part of that, enjoyed how family therapy got the whole family involved. The kid is sometimes the identified victim, but there's something else going on at home. And once you get the whole family engaged, it's much better to kind of get them engaged on a large, long-term, outside of those 6 sessions too. So I wonder if that's sort of somewhere in the pipeline for policies, or CIS has ever looked at it to do more family therapy than just involving the kid.
Yes, so I'm happy to share. Through Project Aware and a lot of funding that we've received through multiple funders, there's a lot of advocates for our work. So our data, and we just changing platforms now from one platform to another to be able to deliver all this data, right? We do so much work, but the data, that's not our expertise for social services, right? So really working in partnership with someone that will elevate that data. But you see that to strategic planning over the next 3 to 5 years, we see the impact of mental health on academics, attendance, and behavior, but really seeing where is that stemming? Where is that stemming issue? Where is the home life? Where is the needs? Where are the basic needs? Has a kid even eaten anything before going to school for the past 3 days? How are we focusing on that academic piece? But really elevating that, our counselors are now able to incorporate a lot of our counselors, depending on programming, some focus on teen pregnancy and some focus on domestic violence, but through our general Project Actis work, we really focus on incorporating family planning part of the treatment plan. So if the issue and presenting concern really does stem on the family unit, we incorporate that. We cannot provide all our 8 accessible counseling sessions through that lens, but we are able to incorporate it into the treatment plan based on what the student needs. So if the student is having depression related to family dynamics or trauma related to family dynamics, we're able to incorporate that in the treatment from 2 to 3 clinical sessions that provide family therapy, utilizing telehealth. A lot of parents, work in the workforce and they're not able to leave, but a 30-minute phone call during their lunch to build a relationship with their child, which does great strides. Mm-hmm.
Great. Maybe one more, if anyone has any. Okay, and then we have some submitted questions.
So, yeah, really great questions, y'all, that you submitted. So I'm trying to discern which ones. I think this one specifically for Ira, what even small steps do you think schools could take to reduce stress on students like yourself?
Coming back to the events, I believe that schools can incorporate more engaging events regarding mental health. I can't stress enough, the suicide prevention week at my school was so crucial and also life-changing, almost because it not only was it took you out of the lunch environment to learn about mental health, which I think most students wouldn't go out of their way to learn about mental health, but through engaging programs just simple tables with pamphlets and people just talking about mental health, I think is so crucial. And yeah.
Another question that I think really helps build off of the question around safety, myself working for the foundation, and when I think about safety, I hope that we're moving that conversation more encompassing than just thinking about school shooting, not discrediting or minimizing how traumatic and impactful that can be for kids and teachers and staff going to school each and every day. But do kids feel safe in the respects of being connected to their school? Do they have friends? Do they have connections in the school? And so I'm curious to hear from each of you, from your perspectives, if you can think of a time where you saw that sense of safety strengthened because there were mental health supports, or there was communities in schools, or a school counselor, or someone prepared and trained to have those types of conversations.
Yes, for sure. Confiding in teachers, counselors, therapists, I think that has a huge impact from a youth perspective on me and my peers. So definitely if there weren't any of that, that would make a huge impact. So again, strengthening the relationship between teachers and students and counselors. I know a lot of school districts obviously can't financially afford school-based therapists, but I think that would be such a huge change if we had therapists in schools, because I think just leaving the classroom, going to a welcoming environment with slime and stress balls and an air diffuser, just taking that time out, and those are trained professionals to address the mental health concerns, I think makes a huge impact, and I would love to see that in every single school.
So there's different scenarios, right, where we could benefit from just the impact of that. But I see, for example, one event that came to mind. We had recently just a SEL night, social emotional, opportunity for parents to not only learn what happens in the classroom in regards to life skills, executive functioning, and the importance of that on a child, but really allowing the opportunity for family and students to connect in a way that's different than at home. The parent being able to come and sit down and build a bracelet with their student about what feelings they had that day, and for the parent to really look at the importance of what each color meant, and even having a conversation with the child of why you had that color part of your bracelet, and really the parent just taking the time to sit down, and this opportunity was great. We had a mental health resource fair at the end of it, in addition to the to the activity pods that we called it, where they were able to learn about century work and just really, what does miniatures look like? What does the definition of a child's emotion look like in the way that they play, in the way that they interact? Children speak through behavior, and we're not seeing that. We're sending them for consequences. We're sending them out of the schools, which is their safe zone, out into an environment where we don't know and we cannot control how safe they are, rather than taking them in and sitting them in a restorative way and really talking to them to really elevate the work that they're doing through those events. So there's so much opportunity, but that tier 1 event really allows teachers being present, talking to parents when they haven't seen them in days or have called them in years because maybe the parents are not answering because they see the phone from the school and they don't answer. Just really that forming those connections in the community and really allowing us to see that we're all in this together for the benefit of the youth. And it's not parents against teachers, teachers against parents, parents are against legislative. It's just really a whole effort. It's really that village, right? Going back to that village, raising our youth and not really separating our expertises to kind of allocate who does what.
First, I want to say I love your analogy about thinking about, did the kid eat breakfast? I'm like, man, what if we thought about school mental health the way we've thought about school lunches? Like, if kids are hungry, they're not going to learn. If kids' mental health is in a bad state, they're not going to learn. Like that. What if we thought about it that way? So I'm going to keep that nugget in the back of my brain. But I like your question about that safe environment, and I immediately thought about one of the counselors at my child's school. Both my children go to a Title I school that has a very large percentage of English language learners. About half of each grade is English language learners, and a pretty large percentage of kids that are relatively new to the U.S. We happen to have some housing that is owned or contracted with Refugee Services of Austin, and so a lot of kids are brand new to the U.S. And every morning, their school counselor is very cheesily, but very sweetly out there with his acoustic guitar, strumming and singing little songs as the kids walk in. And every time I think about a safe school, and I think about what makes a good school, what makes a great school, I think about if every kid in every school, particularly the ones that are coming from experiences that are challenging or they're new and they don't know what to expect at this new school environment. I mean, my kids' class at one point had 10 new arrivals to the U.S. during one school year. And what does it feel like to be welcomed with somebody who's singing a song? And that's what a safe environment looks like to me. It looks like the school counselor, they're welcoming students every single day and making them feel like this is a place where I will be seen and heard and cared for.
I loved all of those examples, and I know that when many of us who understand what we're talking about when we say school mental health, a multi-tiered systems of support, these tier 1, these are the types of things we are thinking about. I think there's sometimes a disconnect with some decision makers on, and sometimes it is necessary, but I think in their mind it's often a psychiatrist writing a prescription and or contacting DFPS, which is sometimes necessary, but these are the types of things that I think make such a huge impact, and it doesn't necessarily take a huge buku of money, but time and resources and personnel are needed, which goes to my next question that was inputted. Last session, there was a lot of conversation around parental consent and its role in all of this, because a lot of these examples would have been impacted with the type of legislation that was introduced that would require written parental consent each and every time any child was somewhat approached under the definition of the legislation. A staff asking how a kid is, the checking in with them, these types of programs. And so I'd be curious to hear from y'all's perspective, what is the role of parental consent, and how would something like requiring parental consent, written parental consent each and every time someone who interacted with a kid, basically asking them how they're doing, could impact access to the types of things that y'all have talked about?
I'll go since I have the mic. So I think it just really stems on two things. I think there's one of, really working through what you said, that stigma piece, and really knowing of, we have nurses on the campuses, right? That our physical health is important and our mental health is too. And I think really looking through that lens of your child is going to need something and there's going to be someone there that helps, right? Your child can go request the help that they need through the nurse's door, which they do. They're busy all the time and they do so much work. On our district, they're also the appointees for self-harmers. But do they have the time and capacity to be able to fulfill that, or can they get side by side door with a licensed mental health professional that is there to say, hey, this student's tummy is really hurting. There's nothing physically that is happening with them. I think it's anxiety. Can you work with them? Right? Really opening the door to having that conversation of collaboration and the importance of it got to be there. It got to be there. And the other piece is really elevating that training piece. I think as professionals, even on our end, on our organization, we don't have the capacity to really dip into that parent role. I think for the parents to be able to get elevated the training and the knowledge of saying this is a need for your student just as much as it is in social interaction, or just as much as having a good morning quote during the intercom, right? That has a positive affirmation for themselves. Are they taking the time in the morning to really reading them a positive affirmation? We're almost offering like, well, we'll do that for you if we build our capacity. And I think parent consent is something that I don't think the necessity is there for Tier 1 work, which, people might disagree. But, consent for the specifics of individual work, of course, that's through licensing. So we have that regulated already. I don't think there's additional regulations to be put in place.
I would like to not have to sign another piece of paperwork for my children's school, because just the number of papers I have to sign, please God, do not make me. Yeah, please. Yeah, they're always in the bottom of the backpack, and it's like, oh no. Of course, it's like as you're running out the door in the morning, it's like, oh my God, I need you to sign this thing. But a little bit of joking aside, I think it comes down to trust. Like, I trust my kids' teachers. I trust the people around them. I trust the librarian. I trick-or-treat at the librarian's house. Like, schools, if your school's really engaged in the community, and there's trust that you've built, right? And if they're showing something that they have the possibility to intervene with my kid, I trust them to do that. I trust them to check in with my kid. I trust them. I also trust them to follow up with me later, to be like, hey, this happened. But I would never want anybody in my child's school to not check in with my kid, to not provide my kid supports, to not make sure that they were able to get their needs met because they're waiting to get a phone call returned from me or get a form signed by me. Like you said, Veronica, there's already, if you're getting treatment at Tier 2 level above, there's already parental consent built in. But one of the bills that Shannon mentioned that we worked on last session are Radiant G circle groups, which are these circles of girls that meet across a semester or across a school year. Always start with a check-in. And the check-in is sunny, cloudy, rainbow. Sunny, what's something good that just happened to you? Cloudy, what's something bad that just happened in your life or disappointing or sad? And rainbow, what's something you're looking forward to? And one of the bills that was proposed around parental consent would call that a mental health evaluation. And so when we say things like teachers checking in with a student of how they're doing might need parental consent, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And it's the idea that you wouldn't feel the trust in your teachers. You're trusting this person with your child for hours and hours a week of their lives. Why wouldn't you trust them to check in on their emotional well-being and mental health? That's just kind of my perspective.
Thank y'all so much for bringing your voice to this conversation, and it's so needed as we move forward into next session. So we hope we stay connected, and please bring your voice to these conversations to your most ability and capacity. So thank you again. If we can give them a round of applause. And in the last few minutes, Anna and I would very, very much appreciate, if you haven't already, scanning this code. And if you click next through the QA, it'll take you to some questions so that we know what was helpful, what would you hope to see next time when we do this again, and really appreciate y'all's participation, the amazing questions you provided for our panel, and for being interested and involved in these really important issues. So thank y'all so much. And that's it.